Barry Rubery was found murdered at his home in Iron Acton, close to Bristol. No one has ever been charged with his murder, and his family is still searching for answers about what happened to the popular retiree. I've spent some time trying to get to know the Barry Rubery that so many people speak so fondly about. While I've discovered he had a good eye for business and was involved in some cash dealings like trading in scrap metal, there doesn't appear to be anything in his life which could have led to his murder. Why would anybody want to kill this very popular family man? Could he have inadvertently caused offence, or was he involved in a financial dispute? Is the answer to this terrible crime centred on his business dealings? Having attended a Masonic function at Down End, about 15 minutes from his house, Barry was dropped home on the night he died by his friends. The next morning, Steve Isles came over to drop something to Barry. What he found was a grisly murder scene.
I walked through the gate, and the first thing I seen was his Masonic case on the floor. I was half tempted to pick it up, but I thought, no, better not, because they get a bit funny about things like that, I think. So I just left it. I thought, thinking to myself now, he must have had a good night last night, being at this inauguration, whatever it was. So I walked through the second gate. As I opened the gate, in front of me, it looked like a load of sick and red stuff, partly covered by the dog's blanket. And I thought, oh dear, he's going to be in a state, he's drunk. And I thought, I'd better go and check on him now, make sure he's all right. So I walked up to the conservatory door, and things were not quite looking right. Before I opened the door, there was like a load of blue wire, a length of blue wire coming through, and there was a shoe over by the hedge. I thought, something's not right here. And I opened the door, and then I found him, just beaten to death. But I don't think I could believe exactly what I was seeing. And then the only person I could see was Joe. Well, it's Joe's one of Joe's workers. Joe's an Indian guy who does a floor screeding. And I'm shouting out to him, get Joe, get Joe. And Joe come out, he said, what's the matter? I said, you better come with me. And he said, something terrible's happened to Barry. So we both go back in. Joe goes in the door first. And then he come back, we just looked at one another. And then I said, obviously got to phone the police.
His wrists and ankles were bound with electrical flex and cable ties, and he endured multiple blunt force impacts which killed him very quickly. Philip Rubery has been showing me the exact place where the attack on his dad began. So he walked around here and he had a confrontation here. So clearly when he opened this door, he had no idea what was hiding behind here. No. So
it'd be quite unusual really for people to know he's using this door, because as I say, it's a recently built extension.
So if they're laying in wait for him, then they must have known about his new behavioural habit to go in this door rather than the other two.
Certainly seems that way, yes.
Or else they were informed about that from someone else who knew.
Yeah.
The police said that there was a suggestion of a struggle here in this garden space, and a suggestion that he was then dragged from here into his home. Those who knew him to be fit and strong, and wonder how he was subdued so quickly. Clive, you've always made the sense, and you picked out in the autopsy report, where his level of alcohol was quite low, and there was no suggestion that he was in any way incapacitated.
No, and I'd have to say, for me, it's always been where did the initial attack take place? For me, the actual whole if you take it all of it in its entirety, just his body weight alone, for me, there was more than one person that was involved in this attack.
All of these theories, the involvement with travellers, the robbery gone wrong, have some validity. But in the course of my review of the case, I've come across something quite extraordinary, which I now believe may unlock this mystery. It's something which the police appear to have given little credence to during their investigations. But I really think it's something which could shed new light on this case. It concerns the way in which Barry's body had been left by the killers, something noticed straight away by Steve Iles, the man who discovered it.
My first thoughts were this is like a sacrificial job. It was a meant job. Arms tied up tightly behind his back with cable ties. I'm sure it was his right leg was tied up and wrapped, and his body was wrapped in wire, but his right leg was up, the trouser leg was partly down, and I didn't recognise his head because it was just beaten to death. I didn't recognise him. It was just a mass of blood.
I've been working with criminologist Professor David Wilson, and we believe that this could lead the investigation back to the organisation at the centre of Barry's life.
Barry Rubery was found trussed up in a sacrificial position. There's certain evidence on his body that suggested a Masonic ritual. For example, his trouser leg was rolled above his knee. And of course, Barry Rubery was a Mason. The Masonic lodge was part of his life. And given the fact that there's nothing stolen, there's nothing missing from his body, then that begins to make me want to look at those Masonic connections as a focus for the inquiry.
So is what happened to Barry in some way connected to the Masons or some sort of ritual? Or did his killers know of his masonry and were they trying to deflect attention from themselves? Or did they even perhaps just set out to mock Barry's Masonic connections? I've come to see Philip and Julie Rubery to tell them for the first time this new revelation about their father's murder. I'm conscious what I'm going to tell them will be upsetting, but I feel it's something they should know. The suggestion that we believe, that we've heard from a number of sources and from Steve Iles and also from Joe and from another source, obviously Steve found the body, was that it was in a very ritualistic, sacrificial position, a suggestion that a signature, a Masonic signature. He was trussed up and his trouser legs that was brought above his knee. The position was not too dissimilar to that which has been found in, suggested to be Masonic punishments.
I've not heard this before at all.
And the key thing, we talked to Professor David Wilson, and the key thing here in all of this is that the strange position of the body, hint of sacrificial position, I know it's very difficult, Julie, it just moves it into a different arena, brings his life as a Mason into it.
Well, I for sure would like to know why they've not picked up on this.
I'm hoping now that this new information may at last make Philip and Julie feel that they're part of the investigation into their own father's murder.
Whenever I speak to the family of murder victims who are disgruntled, they are disgruntled because they don't get information that they feel they should have got and which potentially might help catch the culprit.
The family, until I told them, had no idea about the position in which Barry was found in. And the description from the witness, Steve Iles, was that this was a sacrificial position that reminded him of something from the world of Freemasonry.
And that's why that there has to be a thorough investigation to the family's satisfaction, because the whole time that is there, they will worry about it. So the police will have pictures of the scene, and sometimes police do hold back information and evidence because they want to make sure that evidence that's coming to them is pure. I can get that. The one thing about communication is that there is none.
I've also discovered that there's more to this case than I at first thought. To start with, I've no doubt that had the police probed too deeply into the affairs of the travelling community, or indeed the Masons, they would have been accused of persecution of one sort or another. And this may explain their reticence. As for the murder itself, I think we've pretty much established that it wasn't a robbery gone wrong. But was there a vendetta against Barry? Did those who murdered him know of his Masonic connections? Were they involved with the Masons themselves? Just what was it that led to such a brutal and savage killing? Years have passed since Barry Rubery's murder, and still no one has been brought to trial. His death still continues to traumatize those close to him and haunt the community where he lived. But the more I've learned about Barry's life before his tragic and what appears to be ritualistic death, the more I'm convinced that the police need to start their reinvestigation by looking closely at the traveller connections in Barry's life and at the secret organisation he spent so much of his time interacting with. For all the theories related to this case, there is one certainty. This was not a random act of violence. This was planned. This was an act of design. He knew his killers, or knew those who ordered the killers to be present. The question is whether the motive is related to his business dealings, his work in the community, or even perhaps his membership of the Masons.